Now, it assesses the involvement of 7 key external actors. Talk about China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, the United Nations, in most African countries. And just so you know, the external actors' special attention to military presence, military interventions, contributions to peace, operations, arms, supplies, military trainings, defense and security agreements, and of course, other forms of military and security assistance. Mapping the diverse security-related activities of external actors in Africa is an important first step towards understanding Africa's evolvement or Africa evolving security environment. Now, standing by to discuss this with me via a Zoom call is Public Intel Africa Security Trends Analyst, no other person than Captain Tunde Fatai.
Yep.
Captain, good to have you on board. Welcome. Could you walk me through the roles of external actors in Africa? Now, how does this play out?
Well, the fact is that colonial masters, they are, and they still remain, they still play a major role in our existence. In recent times, you could clearly and purely understand what's been happening in a country like Mali. There has been no peace for a long time. But there have been coups and counter-coups. It couldn't be stopped, despite the fact that France has a major role, or had always played a major role in that country. It gets to a situation where, again, when it happened in Mali, it was quite popular. Against all concerns, people would not believe that a coup would happen and it had been regarded as old-fashioned, as no longer fashioned. But what happened in a country like Mali? Not just Mali alone, Burkina Faso too. It happened there in the Sahel region. Those countries in that area had these issues of coup d'etats, but it never played out with France taking a major role, even when they had bases in that same country. It didn't work out that way. And when the situation happened in Sudan, we had the same issues because the whole thing was becoming a very, very terrible situation. The Islamic movements were having their ways, they were capitalizing on what was happening in most of these countries, taking things into hand. If you couldn't have an army that could take care of the country itself, defending territorial integrity, well, what happens when you have Islamic fundamentalists, the ISIS, ISWAPs, Al-Qaeda, and other related groups operating in such areas? Then what are you talking about? It becomes a difficult situation to hold grounds. And this was before 2020, we had seen a relapse in the number of coups, and it was I argued that, well, it's no longer fashion. You can hardly see any coup d'etat working. It will not work in this country. But that has happened. It has happened again, while external actors like France were visibly around. International organizations also had issues with it. The African Union could not really register their stand, bring in sanctions and all that, even when they banned these countries. The countries behave as if the ban was not holding on them. And you'll be wondering, what has happened? Again, France had its own fair share too, because some of the countries were also accusing France of instigating the military takeover. Of course, the Russians were accused of the same thing. They were accused of the same thing until we have a situation where we can provide our own security by our own self. These external actors will always be there. You always have a situation where the country itself, on a very serious note, every country has its responsibility to protect its own country, its democracy, and all that. But just like the Liberian president said the other time, when the coup d'etat happened, why did the coup d'etat happen in Alex Conde's country? He said, well, that we should also find out why unconstitutional terms are not being followed. That must be another reason for why there's a military coup d'etat. If the politicians follow the right thing, don't say, no, you cannot. At the 9 minutes, you now say, okay, you want to extend your stay or change the constitution. There will be problems.
Okay, all right, Captain. Yeah, moving. Yes, thank you. Now, the most significant action, just like you said, the international democratic community can take to reverse the trends of coup in Africa, just to insensitize democracy. African governments that commit to and uphold democratic practices should merit significantly greater diplomatic support in terms of development, security assistance, and promotion of private investment. Having a knowledge of this, what possible ways will international democratic actors mitigate coups in Africa, or can mitigate coups in Africa?
Well, I will tell you, first and foremost, this action seems to be working because most of the time you find our African leaders having most of their money siphoned outside the country. And when there's a ban, no, you can't come to this country again and you've stopped money there. Stolen money from this part of the country or any part of the country has been stolen and kept outside the African continent. You can't go back to start. So if sanctions are really placed and enforced, it's one of the ways where you can easily have coup d'etats mitigated. Secondly, you need to also look, you said it all, the security aspect. We've had too much of interventions, too much of terrorism. Terrorism is so harsh that if you don't have it in place, how can you hold elections? How can you really ensure that you don't have issues when you can easily intervene with all such issues? You find that elections, yes, you have observers coming in from all over the world and all that, but you find that we still have issues in some countries of rigging. It's still there. So these things have to be put in place if we want to have any peace at all. If you want democracy to be encouraged, they must be seen to be working. We've seen interventions of foreign countries where an African election looks like it's going to be robbed, or there might be some form of intervention, or it might not even hold. You find the international body coming in, show that they are big brothers, that they are monitoring our elections. Until we have such things going on, you will not have a situation where these issues will not continue.
All right. Thank you so much, Captain. It's always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you too. Very many thanks too.
The recent spate of coup in Africa is such a bad news. And in the past 2 years, there's been coups in Mali twice, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, Tunisia, and arguably Algeria and Burundi, many of which were navigating democratic transition. The 82 coups Africa experienced between 1960 and 2000 were devastating for the continent, contributing to the instability, corruption, human rights abuses, impunity, and poverty that characterized many African countries during that